Welcome to Contractor Safety Orientation. Instructions while working inside our company and prior to starting the activities of your project. We will start with the introduction. All contractors are subject to these safety, health, environmental, and security regulations. It is the foreman or management of the contractor's duty to ensure that each of their personnel will adhere completely to these regulations. Failure to abide by these regulations may result in the suspension of work operations, the dismissal of contractor, and even the loss of the contract. The next slide is the requirement for basic safety. Please read and understand all of the requirement of our company. Your activity will not start until all requirements are satisfied.
Contractor Safety Orientation. Basic safety. Before beginning any type of work, get information about any hazards in the work area where the contractor personnel will be stationed from the contractor's supervisor and our company's safety officer. Contractor employees are prohibited from entering or accessing any locations that are not directly related to their employment and must first obtain permission from our company's safety officer. When entering or departing the property through the guardhouse, each contractor employee is obliged to sign the visitor register. The designated parking area is where all contractor staff should leave their personal automobiles. The contractor must make arrangements in advance to enable for equipment and material unloading inside the facility's grounds. Vehicles must leave the building immediately after unloading any tools or equipment, otherwise, they may be searched and inspected. The security office will require a personnel work permit and gate pass before allowing the entry of any tools or equipment. Smoking is not permitted anywhere in the facility. A contract employee who violates company policy by using or possessing alcohol, illegal drugs, or controlled substances while on company property, or by reporting to work while impaired by alcohol or drugs, faces possible arrest and/or a ban from entering the property altogether. Contractor personnel are required to abide by any warnings and safety notices. Horseplay is not permitted. It is not permitted to work while wearing a sleeveless shirt, a t-shirt with derogatory or insulting text, or cut-off shorts. When working at the facility, steel-toe shoes must be worn all the time. It is against the law to possess firearms and/or other weapons on business premises, and anyone caught breaking will not be allowed inside the premises. Contractor ID badges must be given back to the security professional or guard each day. The contractor is required to follow all applicable OHS standards as well as regional laws. Contractor staff must supply barricades to demarcate work zones and put up warning signs as needed. Employees of the contractor are not permitted to operate facility equipment or open or close valves that are unrelated to the work being done. All ladders and scaffolds used must adhere to regulations. It is not permitted to utilize scaffolding or homemade ladders. Ladders longer than 6 feet need to be secured. All applicable OHS standards must be complied with, such as hoisting equipment. Next slide we will discuss the rules for personal protective equipment.
Contractor Safety Orientation Rules for Personal Protective Equipment. For information on the PPE needed in the location where you will be working, contact the company's safety officer. In addition to providing the required safety gear, the contractor is in charge of ensuring its proper use and upkeep. When working overhead or on structures, hard hats must be worn. On the next slide we will discuss the environmental regulations and enforcement.
Contractor Safety Orientation. Environmental regulations and enforcement. Unless otherwise agreed upon in the contract document, non-hazardous construction waste and debris shall not be permitted to amass and will be removed daily by the contractor at its expense. Contractors are responsible for clearing away all waste and debris produced by materials they delivered to the job site or during demolition activities, and they must do so in accordance with all applicable rules and regulations. When it is practicable, contractors should work with the plant to separate waste or debris that can be recycled or utilized again in an environmentally friendly and safe way. Keep in mind to protect the company name or any of its trademarks by full compliance to the law. It is forbidden for contractors working outside to pour any liquid, including water, down the drain or onto the ground. All water must be disposed of at a wastewater drain inside the facility, providing it wasn't contaminated. Before bringing hazardous chemicals on site, contractors, contractor personnel, or subcontractors must provide MSDS, risks and hazards, mark all containers, and submit a copy of any applicable permits. Hazardous wastes are not to be disposed of in any drain or sewer. The contractor must make sure that all staff members who deal with hazardous wastes and materials have received all legally needed training and are aware of the dangers these wastes and materials pose. The contractor acknowledges that any and all hazardous wastes produced by his or her actions on the property will be completely his or her responsibility. Contractors are required to appropriately label of any hazardous trash or materials they produce. All hazardous materials must be disposed of correctly following with all laws that may be in force. The next slide we will discuss the needed warning or hazard communication needed in your project site.
Contractor Safety Orientation Warning Communications. The company safety officer will provide contractor personnel with any time over the course of the work process with information about specific hazardous materials to which they may be directly exposed while conducting work. When appropriate, operational controls for severe hazards will be covered during the orientation. Before beginning any on-site activity, each contractor delivering chemicals must give the facility the relevant MSDS of such chemicals. Contractors are in charge of providing company personnel who may come into contact with their work or products that present a health risk with the training and information they need. On the next slide we will discuss emergency actions for events unforeseen during the course of your activity. But remember, prevention is still better than cure, so all preventive actions must be undertaken.
Contractor Safety Orientation Emergency Actions. Fire reporting. Contract staff must trigger the closest fire alarm pull station and evacuate the building before attempting to put out the fire. Before beginning work, find the closest fire alarm pull station location. Evacuation techniques. Contractor staff are supposed to leave the building as soon as the fire alarm sounds and proceed to the assembly locations using the safest route. Avoid the impacted areas. For headcount purposes, contract employees are required to report to the safety evacuation area designated by the company. Contractor staff members are not allowed to enter the premises unless the company's emergency response team gives them permission. First aid situations. You must report any life-threatening conditions, serious injuries, or unconsciousness-inducing injuries, and provide any other information the guard may need. For the purpose of keeping records, first aid events must be reported to the company's safety officer or nurse. On the next slide we will discuss the fire risks and firefighting resources requirement of your project.
Contractor Safety Orientation Fire Risks and Firefighting Resources. Workplaces must be kept tidy and free of all mechanical and fire dangers. All fire extinguishers, fire alarm pull stations, firefighting equipment, and spill cleanup equipment must be accessible from the aisle. Fire hydrants must not be blocked by the vehicles or operations of contractors. Without the permission of the company safety officer, contractor workers may not use any fire extinguishing equipment for other purposes when not putting out fires. In an emergency, only professionally trained contractor workers should try to use any fire extinguishing equipment. Notify the safety officer right away so that a replacement fire extinguisher can be installed if a fire extinguisher was discharged for any reason or if contract workers observe an exhausted fire extinguisher. No parts or equipment may be cleaned using gasoline or other combustible liquids. On the next slide we will discuss the spill response protocols. All preventive work should be done in the first place so that it will not happen.
Contractor Safety Orientation Spill Response Protocols. Each contractor is required to offer and be outfitted with the proper spill response tools. Everyone who participates in the emergency response to a leak of hazardous materials, including contractors, contractors personnel, and subcontractors, must have received training. The contractor is in charge of carrying out the necessary cleanup of spills brought on by their operations. Any materials harmed by the spill, such as building materials, soil, groundwater, or surface waters, will need to be removed or remedied as part of the cleanup process. Contractors are required to inform the plant right away of any spills and releases of hazardous materials. On the next slide we will discuss the special work permit for work activity that poses hazard to the person and properties.
Contractor Safety Orientation Special Work Permit. Hot work, cutting, and welding. All areas are off limits to welding, cutting, and other hot work, operations that produce heat or sparks, unless a hot work permit is issued by the safety officer. The permit is valid for the duration of the allowed shift, which is not to exceed 12 hours. Comply with all requirements for approval listed in the permit. Entry into confined space. No contractor employees are allowed to enter a vessel or restricted area without first securing a permit that has been approved by the safety officer. The contractor must supply the necessary safety gear for entering a vessel or confined space and must show that everyone involved in the entry has received the appropriate confined space entry training. Without a hot work permit and a confined space permit, contractor personnel are not permitted to weld or execute other hot work inside a vessel or on related pipe. Practices for electrical work. Contractor personnel must fill out a lockout permit and notify the safety officer before working on electrical equipment. The lockout of the equipment that will be de-energized is under the safety officer's supervision. Contractor employees must assume that all electrical cables are energized unless they have been locked out by company staff. Only electricians are permitted to perform electrical work. Electrical contractors' employees are not permitted to use non-insulated tools, metal headgear, or rules made of metal. In order to maintain the identity of the electrical equipment, contractor workers working on new installations must appropriately mark all electrical equipment at the time of installation with permanent tags, signs, or strips. Handling of compressed gas. The contractor's cylinders must be marked and separated into full and empty ones. All contractor cylinders must be kept upright and securely fastened. When not in use on a routine setup, contractors must keep cylinder valves closed, hand-tight, and safety caps in place. Employees of the contractor are required to transfer compressed gas cylinders by utilizing a cart that allows the cylinder to be secured.
Congratulations! You already completed the contractor safety orientation. Go to the company's safety officer for additional information such as contact details, emergency evacuation location and submission of needed requirements. As of now you can secure work permit and you can now start your activity and project. Thank you.